On the other side of toxic Christianity, I found myself faced with one question. Now what? This podcast is about that question. We have conversations with folks who are asking themselves the same things. We're picking up the pieces of a fractured and fragmented faith. We're finding treasure in what the church called trash, beauty and solidarity in people and places we were told to fear, reject, and dismiss. I'm Tammy Spencer Helms, and this is Life After Leaven. Hey everybody, welcome back to Life After Leaven. I'm your host, Tammy Spencer Helms. I'm joined by my dear friend, Nya Abernathy. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nya, and then we're going to jump into this episode because I know it's about to be dope. So Nya is an educator, writer, speaker, and soul care usher. I can testify to that. She's the founder of The Dignity Effect, a boutique education firm specializing in social emotional learning experiences for adults. Her 15 plus years of vocational experience in a variety of human service work in concert with her years-long personal journey towards well-being has deeply equipped Nya to accompany others on their journey. Focusing on the intrinsic worth and value of each person, Nya anchors learners in the dignity they and others hold from their loved ones to their enemies. She centers truth-telling, soul care, and story as she gives guidance in the areas of relationships, faith-focused topics, mental health, and social justice. An intuitive communicator, Nya also speaks and writes on wonder and awe, with a special interest in the cosmos and interconnectedness. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, 2 kiddos, and her portable karaoke mic. True that. You can find her words and work on Twitter, Substack, Instagram, and at her website, nyabernathy.com. Hello, friend.
Hi, darling. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited for people to get to hear from you. You have no idea.
Thanks for having me.
Let's jump in. Let's just jump right on in. So the question that we ask every guest when they come on is, what does life after Leaven look like for you? So the way that I'd love for you to kind of take us there is by talking to us a little bit about what it looked like before and after you unleavened in terms of faith.
Yeah. So I mean, I could probably be very succinct with this. Before when my faith was full of leaven, I was living from a space of a lot of legalism, perfectionism, um, unchecked mental health issues, a lot of loneliness, self-hatred, second guessing myself, seeing God, like I would approach scripture already expecting God to be disappointed, mad, just already, and when you do that, it's very hard to read things like God loves you and really believe it, even though it says it right there. So that's what I mean, in a nutshell. That's kind of how my spirituality felt. That's what my life was full of. Yeah. So.
And so what did you grow up like in Black church, or did you grow up in white evangelicalism? What was your kind of background?
So my background has been in Black church. It's just a variety of Black churches. So one of my first church experiences, like long-term, my mom and I were there for years, was a United Methodist church, but it was run by a well-known Black pastor here in the Atlanta area. And then in middle school, I got into the Pentecostal church and have been in all different flavors of Black Pentecostalism. My mom was a part of an AME church for a long time. There's Black Baptist in my family. So I've had all kinds of flavors, but I didn't really interact with specifically white evangelicalism until I was in my mid-20s. Wow. And I didn't know, like I was like, Jesus, everybody gets it and understands, right? And I was like, well, this is kind of weird and a little boring, but it's fine because Jesus. And then, it didn't take too long to realize, like, oh, I don't think we are talking about the same things. So, yeah.
So you make this discovery that we're not talking about the same things. You have this kind of rich upbringing and different elements of Black church. Was there an event that kind of led to you kind of discovering what that leaven looked like for you in your faith? Was there an event? Was it gradual? Like how did your process on unleavening unfold?
I would say, I actually think there are three really significant points. One was realizing that I needed to address my mental health status, because I had been living in and out of depressive episodes with really, really, really bad anxiety. Later found out that I've also dealt with like obsessive compulsive disorder, and none of it was, I didn't know any of that stuff was there. Um, and so there was a point where I felt such an amount of anger and rage towards myself, that I could feel the harm that it was doing to my soul. And I was like, and I remember the moment when I thought, oh, well, we'll just go there. I don't even remember what happened. I had done something quote unquote wrong. Um, and I got really angry with myself because I couldn't. It's like, why are you still doing things wrong? Which now is laughable, but I was so angry because I've been trying so long to just get it right. For years, I've been doing everything to just get it right. And I had this moment. I would not say that it was suicidal in the general understanding of it, but I was so angry at myself that I wanted to harm myself because of my anger. I've never felt like that about anybody. And I was like, okay, something's wrong. Like this is whatever I think God imagined for me. This is not it. And that was the moment where I started to consider possibly thinking about another way to handle or to respond to a God that I thought was always angry at me, or my need to get things right. So that was one point. And then another point, it was when I was leaving. I'd moved to Philadelphia for college. I was leaving Philadelphia and coming back home to Atlanta. And I was pretty sure that the church denomination I was in at the time, I was not going to return to. But I was pretty sure, but not sure. And I remember asking God a very specific question. As I was like, listen, I know that people say it takes this, this, and this, and this, and this for salvation. And if that's true, that's fine. I will go all in on this, but I need to know for sure, because I have questions, and I need to know for sure that that's what you say. So my question to God was, what do you require for salvation? And that took me on a journey away from certainty. I mean, essentially, it just took me on a journey away from certainty. And then the third point was, it was the first time that I was in an all-white church, and Mike Brown happened, and there was a comment made by someone in leadership, a white male in leadership, about the bemoaning how the police officer was going to be found guilty no matter what, even just. And I remember I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. I was like, wait, what? And that was kind of the third point where it really moved into more of I started becoming very aware of the racial dynamic within toxic Christianity that I hadn't really paid attention to. So, yeah.
My gosh. And so you're bumping up against the racist dynamic. God is talking to you about what is required for salvation. and you're starting to move like sort of in that direction. And so eventually, somehow, you and I come to be in the same community. So can you talk a little bit about like what led you to be a part of the Inverse community and how that happened? Because I really want people to hear one of my favorite things to talk to you about, but kind of talk, like, get me there first before we jump in. How did you find Inverse?
So I actually was, I met somebody who was part of Inverse on Instagram,
Okay.
and we met through something else, and we had started messaging. And she said, "Hey, do you want to?" I mean, this is September 2020, right? Nobody's doing anything, you know.
Exactly.
And I had at the time, excuse me, I had an 8-month-old at home, you know. I just, you know, and so she asks like, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this book study?" And I was like, "No." Or she said a book club, and I was like, "No, that sounds terrible. I wouldn't be a part of a book club if there wasn't a pandemic." I didn't say that. I was like, "I don't know, maybe." She's like, "It's really good. I think you'll really like it. Like, we have been talking about like indigenous theology and stuff like that." And I was like, "Okay," because in my head I'm like, "What are we like drinking wine on Zoom? Like, this doesn't sound like fun to me." Um, and so like she was persistent, because she came back a couple weeks later and she was like, "I really think you should come to this book club." And I was like, "Oh, fine, I'll come to your book club." And I didn't know nobody. She's like, "Well, here's the book." I was like, "Not getting that book." And they're reading Who Will Be a Witness by Dr. Drew G. I. Hart.
Yes.
And I was like, "Well, I'm not getting the book. I'm just going to show up and like be in the cut on mute and just kind of see." I don't know. First of all, it wasn't a book club. That was completely inaccurate, like, of what was actually going on, first of all. Because I showed up and I was like, "This is not wine and books. Like, that's not what this is." Um, and and I showed up the first time, and and once I realized that it was kind of like a serious like dive into like this book, I was like, "I'm completely unprepared. These people are gonna, you know, kind of going back to some of those things I was still working through even in 2020." So this first thing that I told you about that happened when I was like, "This is," you know, I was angry at myself and I realized like this is not, that was like 2007, right? Like, so in 2020 I'm still like, I don't know, are they going to be mad because I didn't have the book, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm having, you know, all of these concerns. But I go through this first time and I sit down with my husband and I'm like, I immediately buy the book, first of all. And then I was like, I don't know what I just went to, but I think I'm going to be busy every Tuesday night at 8:30 from now on because it's real good.
Yeah.
Um, and at that time, we hadn't yet left our church officially, but we hadn't been, and we were moving towards not going back. And so I came in at the beginning of Who Will Be a Witness and just started realizing, that there was this community of people, global community of people who had some of the same like questions and concerns. And the thing that really got me, and I remember telling my best friend about it, I was like, "They really do this thing." Like, go in and, you know, Drew and Jared are talking about how they center the voices of Black women. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh,
Yeah, for
oh,
real.
you really do it.
Yeah.
Like, you're not kidding. And for the first time, I've always had things to say, but I have never been given the space to
Yes.
speak. And I was like, oh, it was wild. And I remember saying like, they really do this thing, and they do it every week, like, and they've been doing it for months. Like, I'm like explaining, like, they're not like, "Okay, now we're done with that." Like, no, this is how it's set up. And
Yes.
that was so, it was liberative and refreshing and different, and like giving space as things came up. Like, okay, well, like there would be books that we would read with topics that would focus on like the queer community, and then we'd say, okay, so the queer community tonight gets to speak up. And then it wasn't a question of who was going to speak or not, like that. It was obviously we were going to center the voices of those who are being focused on the text that we're going through. And that was, I grew up in church and I have never had an experience like that before, but it felt the way that I wanted church to be. So, yeah.
Samesies.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I meet at
Yeah.
I met my spouse. They were already attending subversive seminary, and that's how I found out about it. And it was shocking to me. Like, wait a minute, what? There are people mad about the same stuff and love the same things
Yeah.
Jesus that I love about Jesus, and y'all are reading and talking and laughing and cutting up. Like, what is
Yeah.
this? So
Yeah.
I remember that, and I know that you and I, after I met you, we had other conversations, and that's where I would love for our listeners to really get to hear from you. So at the end of the book, I write this sort of acknowledgement of the land that I'm on. And I talk about how this land is very special to me because of my friend Sarah Quint, who we both know.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what it's like for us as Black people to kind of come back to ourselves, our bodies, and to come back to the land, and I talked about how my relationship with land before I met Sarah was very, very complicated because of the history of this land. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what does it mean for us as we unleaven our faith to kind of recover things that were lost, particularly as it relates to embodiment and being connected to creation and to the land and the cosmos? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course.
I know that's your
This is
thing.
like one of my favorite things to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. Whew. So I have the pleasure of writing about wonder and awe over at Substack. And my whole goal is to talk about how deeply interconnected we are, like inextricably interconnected, not just with one another. I know that's a big focus right now because we are so siloed and separated and like antagonistic towards each other as humans. But we are also separated and siloed um, away from creation that we are connected to, whether it's the water, the plants, the air. Um, there's a couple of things that for me have been so poignant as I think about these things, like the fact that we talk a lot about when we're talking about embodiment, particularly. If you're new to that space, maybe one of the first things that you will practice is connecting with your breath. Mm-hmm. And it always brings me to a place of deep gratitude to know that I do not have breath without trees. I can't, because of the atmosphere of the earth, because of the elements that flew millions of light years from supernova onto this earth and how they all mix together. I have to have trees and plants in order to take my breath. I can't. It doesn't work. The air is not what is necessary for me to breathe and to live without trees. And that is like, I mean, man, I don't even have good words for what that means for us as we consider our connection to the whole of creation. And I think when we're talking about embodiment, and I think about things like grief and the way that we embody grief. And the offering that scripture gives us, that the earth grieves with us as well. And Sarah Quint has said things to undergird that, particularly to the Black community, which have been jarring because we have a very fraught history with trees.
Yes.
Particular. in particular, used as weapons to take away our breath.
It's just
That you,
mm,
the gut cellular grief and trauma around that cannot be overstated.
mm, mm, mm,
Um, but I believe it can be healed.
mm.
And I do not think it can be healed without the trees and without our breath and without um, the earth. I don't think we can heal those things without coming back to her
Mhm.
and allowing her to mother us, and to hold us,
Yes.
and
Mm,
and sometimes it can feel alienated even when we try.
mhm.
But one thing that Sarah Quint has always encouraged me, even when it's been hard, like I will go out to be amongst nature. I have some favorite spots, and like some days I'm like, it was really hard for me to be there.
Mhm.
And she encourages me without um, without any gaslighting or any negating of my experience
Yeah.
to keep going,
Yes.
because uh, the earth and the trees are there to welcome me there.
Whew.
Um, and that has been a very personal process. It's been a very painful process, and it's been a very beautiful process that I'm now doing my best to connect my children with the earth in ways that are really beautiful and life-giving early on, so
Mhm.
that they have that
Yes.
foundation within them as they start to learn more of the harder parts of our historical experience.
Yes.
And um, also remembering that enslaved folks, the they're amazing. They were amazing because they would take those same hard spaces and go hide or
Mhm.
escape or have or create hush harbors. Like they had this sense
Mhm.
that yes, there is this thing happening where the earth is being used against us, but the earth is also here to cover and to hide and to rejoice and to provide a space for us.
Mhm. Mhm.
um the night is here to cover us, the
Yes.
moon and the stars are here to guide us. So there was there was this connection that remained.
Mhm.
um and so I think in our bones we have the both and,
Yeah.
but the pain can be so much louder
Mhm.
than than uh than the other connections. And it is something that we have to, if we're going to heal, we will have to face that.
Mhm. That's one of the first things I remember about meeting you was the invitation to breathing and the invitation to being grounded. And I'm thinking about that as I'm learning that, like, there was so much of my faith that I did completely ungrounded.
Mhm.
And so I'm thinking about this as I'm trying to use this podcast to kind of help people who are like, okay, read the book, ready to think about what a new way of life and God looks like. And I'm trying to introduce people to folks who really helped me figure out what it looks like on the other side of that. And I think that there's a couple of things that I've learned from you, and you can kind of talk about this however you want. But in terms of thinking about how we live and how we move, like, the three themes that you talk about being connected to as a person, like, can you delve into that just a little bit and talk to us about that? Because I know there's stuff coming, but if you could just give us a little taste of that.
Yeah. So I think a lot and write and speak a lot about belonging. And as I've looked at my own story, as well as interacted with people, I mean, vocationally and personally, and, there are these areas of belonging that I think are very universal, that often we feel a disconnection from. And my goal is to help us, with care and with community, like get back to that connection. And I don't know if I want to say get back to, because I, that can feel complicated or impossible or nostalgic, and I really do not want to. I don't want to offer nostalgia for the way it was back then. Like, well,
that's the good old days,
right? We're not talking about good old days. And that connection is not gone. It's not something necessarily to recover, because the things that I the three kind of areas, the connection is there. I think it's so much more about seeing it, engaging it, leaning into it, believing it is a part of it too. And so I think there's three areas of belonging that probably every human struggles with for a variety of reasons. One, I think, is belonging to capital L love, is what I like to say. And so I am talking for those of us who come from a Christian context. Yes, I'm talking about God, but I want that to be more expansive, because often God has been, there's already the box. And if I say God, you picture the box God, and that's not who I'm talking about.
White Jesus.
Right. I am talking about the capital L love that is expansive enough and imaginative enough and wide-eyed and loving enough to create a universe that billions and billions of years into its existence, there would be this creation that could trace the lines back and see how we were connected to all of it from the very beginning. Yes. Like that's the capital L love that each of us belong to. And it's not about a religion. It's not about a faith from, whether you're atheist or whether you're like really like, I am religious and I need a place and the rituals and all the things.
Yes.
And anybody in between, this love exists and you belong to this love. Yes. And so that's one space. Then the next space is belonging to ourselves. And so often, definitely in the toxic Christianity that's led by white Jesus and purity culture and all these other things, racism and misogyny, we don't belong to ourselves. There's scriptures quoted out of context about it all the time. There's certain, let me tell you what I can guarantee if you have been in church for any amount of time, is that you have probably heard more sermons preached about how you don't belong to yourself than you have heard preached about your Imago Dei. That's a problem. Because the text doesn't start off with us not belonging to ourselves. The text starts off with Imago Dei. And folks don't start there.
Wow.
So if we're going to talk about that text and we're going to talk about wholeness and we're going to talk about belonging to ourselves, we have to go all the way back where we get some insight from the authors of Genesis about a God who is not, akin to a Marduk, who is like, humans are my slaves and I don't care about them.
Come on, Marduk. Okay, Babylon.
But it's pointing to a God that says, no, we have a different narrative. And what I think is so, and shout out to Rachel Held Evans, because she's the first one who introduced me to this. And I said, and the way she told, we like wove the pictures of these two things together. I was like, you're amazing. And I'm grateful for her gift while she was here, and she should still be here. I wish she was. Um, so she, against this picture of Marduk, says the people that were enslaved in Babylon said, I have a different imagination about this God. And it's not a God that created us for enslavement. It's a God who created us for relationship. Right. It's a God that said, I have this idea and I'm excited about it. What am I going to give this creation? I'm going to give them breath. I'm going to give them resemblance. I'm going to give them connection. We don't look like God on the outside. God isn't human. But God said, but what I'm going to give you and tether myself to you with is delight. And we don't talk about a God that delights in us just because we exist. We don't talk about a God that created out of a place of delight and wholeness and community within God's self. Because if we did, we would have to ask questions about the whole way things are set up, not just in society, but in the church as a whole. Black church, white church, Catholic church, liturgical church, Pentecostal 4-hour church. All of us would have to ask some questions. And I don't know how ready we are to do that. So I'm going to bring it back because I went over here. I'm going to bring it back. And so belonging to ourselves is crucial and biblical.
Yes.
And then the last portion is about belonging to one another. And when I say one another, people are going to think I'm talking about just humans. Let me establish the work that I do around dignity. I have a specific definition I use for dignity. Dignity is the intrinsic worth and value each being carries that cannot be taken away. Human beings are not the only beings. So when I say community is when we're connected to one another, it's all the one another's. It's the humans, it's the trees, it's the stars, it's all of the things that are connected. Everything that has breath, praise the Lord, was not just for humans. Come on, we were told the rocks will cry out. Well, the Spirit said there is breath in the rock. Everything that has breath is a one another that we are connected to. And we see the results of being disconnected from all of the one another's. We see it in the ecological crisis. We see it in the ecological crisis kind of covers it. I see it as I'm reading and learning about the cosmos. I see it in people having imagination of colonizing asteroids. And I'm like, leave the asteroids alone. They are not, stop. Like, no.
They about to colonize the planets out here.
Hello. So even in our imagination, we are disconnected from the one another, and we don't ask what the other needs. What are the desires of the other? What are the desires? This is something, you and I both learned this from Sarah Quinn. What is the desire of the water? Probably to run free, to be clean, to be full of all the life that it's been full of, and not to be full of our trash and our refuse that we just throw off and think it doesn't matter.
Wow.
When we ask those questions about the one another's that are not just humans, because we don't even ask about that, child. We just do what we want, which I'm not going to get too far into the socio-political part, but part of that is the toxic individualism that we live in. And there is an individualism that exists within the context of community that is healthy. That is me being whole makes the community whole as well. And when I am not whole, my community isn't whole. When we think about ourselves individually in that way, there's healthy reciprocity. When we think about ourselves as I am whole alone by myself and I don't need anybody or anything else to be whole, let me tell you what, we have forgotten that we can't breathe without trees. That's what happens in that breakdown. Woo! So these are the three areas that I really like. My desire, I think of myself as someone who is a fellow journey person. I was going to say journeyman, and I'm like, well, I don't journey. sojourner. I think sojourner might be the right word.
Yes.
um, um, but I want to journey with people because I have not arrived, but I have been journeying for a while. And so there's some guidance that I can give. There's some encouragement. There's some comfort. There's some care from my experience on the road as we journey together. And I can't pull the person up in my head right now, but the quote, this is not my quote, but I think it's beautiful. And as we journey together when we're walking each other home, like that's really the goal in my writing. That's the goal of my teaching. That's the goal of my speaking. How can I help the people right in front of me? How can I walk with them a little further down the road as we're walking each other home?
Now y'all see why I had Nya on. We're just gonna let this sit. So that's one thing I've learned is just to be comfortable with a little bit of silence when truth is spoken or when God is speaking, to go ahead and take the time to plant my feet on the ground and to hear those words and let them sink in. And I think that that's something that I do pretty much anytime you open your mouth. I am so thankful for you and for what you bring, and I'm so excited for you to begin to like let us all hear all of the things that are percolating inside of you. And we would definitely have you back. But I'm gonna end this the way I end all podcasts with these final 3 questions. And the first question is, what are you bringing? So what are you bringing with you from the rubble? What is worth keeping from the time before you unleavened that you notice God in and you want to keep? Number 2 is, what are you binging? So film, movie, book, album. And then what are some words to live by that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah. What am I bringing? If anybody asked me today, if I was in a context where this mattered and they said, well, what tradition do you come out of? I would say I'm Pentecostal. I will still say I'm Pentecostal. Doesn't mean there's not stuff to be done. But I am. And what I'm bringing very specifically, I'm bringing my tambourine. I'm bringing my joy. I'm bringing that. I mean, I remember moments deep in my own pain, being able to sing or play the tambourine, and I would sing my grief or sing my joy or sing my hope or sing my disappointment. And there's something about what Pentecostalism that I have experienced allows you to be opened up to. And it might feel a little redundant, but I would call myself now specifically a Pentecostal mystic, that God is so much more than we have allowed God to be. And that I'm searching the mystery of that to see what I can like catch glimmers of and share with those who will listen. And I'm bringing my tambourine with me.
That makes you think of Ephesians 3, the whole like, what is the height and the depth and the width and the breadth, right? Like, so this mystic depth, but this Pentecostal height and breadth.
Yes.
That's so beautiful. What are you binging anything right now?
Oh yes. Well, I have to give I was like, okay, there's too many things, but all right. So, I have a lot of books that I'm reading. I read several books at one time, but the book that I really am just enjoying is a book called Awe by Dr. Keltner. I believe I said his name right. He just recently did a podcast with Krista Tippett on the science of awe. Wow. And if anybody knows him, please say my name in a room with him, because I would love to just connect with this man. He has done decades of research around emotions and awe, and what he offers in his book has been just so rich. I'm really enjoying listening to that. And then what am I binging? I am, among other things, I am binge watching Only Murders in the Building.
Oh
It
yeah,
is a really good show. And it's a
that's the
good,
Martin
like,
Short, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's such a good, like, it's interesting, but it's not heavy. Like, it's something where I'm like, what's gonna happen next? But
yeah.
it's keeping my attention in really beautiful ways. So yeah.
Awesome. And any words to live by?
Yes. So if anybody knows me, um, they know that I love Leslie Odom Jr. Um, I don't have good words. He is just phenomenal and has really impressed for me how I show up in my vocation. And I
Mm.
was listening to a podcast he was on, and uh, I don't remember what the question was, but um, I think it was something like, "What do you think our purpose is, or what do you think the point of us being alive is, or something?" And he said, "I think we are here to be extension of God's will." And I thought,
Wow.
uh, I mean, it just drips of like imago Dei and dignity and I just and
Wow.
then I started thinking about supernovas and I tweeted about it and it just was like, this is just and so you embodied when you talk about embodiment, like we are here embodied as extensions of God's will. And if you're like, I don't know what God's will is, then I would say seek after your unique expression of Imago Dei, because that is God's will in your embodied reality in the earth at such a time as this is the full expression of your Imago Dei in belovedness, in wholeness, and in oneness. So those are the words that just came up for me when you asked that question.
You know me, the nerd in me. I'm like, that's totally the passage where I guess I think it's Set Thessalonians where he says, "This is the will of God for you,
Yeah.
your sanctification." Now, we always thought that meant purity culture, but what it means is
Mm-hmm.
becoming you, right? Becoming like
Yes.
God, who is what? Whole. Whole
Whole.
with the W,
Whole.
like you say. Like, I
With
mean, you're
yep.
the first person I ever heard say that, holy with a W. And like,
Whole-iness. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, like that is totally the dignity effect. Everything that you do is completely biblical. And so that's why I'm so excited, because I think people need to know that even though these ideas may be new, may have even been villainized in your tradition, that this is holy, godly, this is helpful for our faith, and that we would be sanctified, that we would possess our vessels, right,
Yes.
for
Yes.
glory and
Come
honor.
on.
What is
Come
that
on.
other than dignity? That is the will of God for you, to
Yeah.
possess this vessel with an
Mm-hmm.
understanding of who you are, whose you are, and that this process of becoming is the point, right? Like,
Yes.
and so I
Yes.
feel you on that. I feel you on that. I'm like jazzed. And now I'm done with the podcast and I'm wishing we started now. But here we are, and I know you're booked. So we're gonna close out. Tell us where we can find you.
Yes, I would love for you to come join me over at Substack, where I'm writing every month
Yep.
to kindle your wonder and awe with our feet on the ground and our eyes lifted up to the sky. And my publication is called Of Earth and of Stars. So
Yeah.
please come join me there. So you can find me there. You can find me on Twitter at Nya Abernathy. You can find me on Instagram. If you are interested, I mean, just follow me in both places. The Dignity Effect is where I talk about our social emotional well-being. Right now, I'm going through a self-awareness series. And you can also find me at Nya S. Abernathy at Instagram, where I do talk a little bit more about wonder and awe. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other places. Oh, and I am on YouTube too. So definitely find me on YouTube at The Dignity Effect there.
Sis, I love you deep. I'm so
Love
glad
you
we
too.
actually are actual friends. So I get to hear from you on a regular basis. But I know that my listeners are blessed by this, and will definitely be finding you as they should. And I just say thank you so much for what you're contributing to those of us who are out here lost, and trying to find our way. Thank you for all that you're doing and will continue to do. It's been an honor having you on, sis.
Yes, love you. Thank you for having me.
It was